They said my well didn't fit the neighborhood image. A week later, I woke up to the sound of trucks outside, and by sunrise, my water was gone, replaced by concrete. The HOA thought they'd finally forced me into submission. What they didn't know: I designed their entire water system. My name is Sam Collins. For 20 years I worked as a civil engineer designing municipal water networks, the kind that keep cities running. When I retired, all I wanted was quiet. So I bought a small piece of land just beyond city limits, a leftover parcel from the area's old farming community. The property came with a hand-dug well, later upgraded with a modern pump. Cleanest water you could ask for. No chemicals, no bills, just gravity, engineering, and peace. Then the High Ridge Lake HOA formed. At first it sounded harmless, promises of landscaping, shared maintenance, community pride. But within months, the president, Marjorie Lane, turned it into her personal kingdom. She didn't like my gravel driveway. She didn't like that I stored tools in my shed. And she especially didn't like my well. It lowers property values, she said one afternoon, smiling like she was doing me a favor. Everyone else uses city water. You should too. I told her politely that the well was fully legal, inspected, and private. She frowned, clipboard in hand. We'll see what the board says. That's when the letters started: mandatory connection notices, non-compliance warnings, community violation fees. I ignored them. My well wasn't their business. But to people like Marjorie, no isn't an answer. It's a challenge. One Tuesday morning, I heard engines growling near the driveway. 3 trucks were parked by the fence, concrete mixers, of all things. Men in orange vests were unrolling hoses toward my well. I ran out. Hey! What do you think you're doing? A foreman shrugged. Order from the HOA. Decommissioning an unsafe structure. Unsafe? It had passed inspection 6 months earlier. Marjorie stood nearby, sunglasses gleaming. You're welcome, Sam. Now you can hook up to city water like the rest of us. I told her she had no authority to touch my property. She smiled. It's for community safety. By the time the sheriff arrived, the damage was done. The wellhead was sealed under 6 feet of concrete. The deputy flipped through paperwork inside. Looks like a civil matter, sir. I couldn't believe it. They had literally buried my independence, and the law called it a disagreement. That night I sat at my desk, staring at the stack of letters she'd sent. Then something familiar caught my eye: the utility permit number on the HOA's official letterhead. I knew that number. I had written it 15 years ago, back when I was contracting for the city. It was the identifier for the High Ridge Water Distribution Plan, the system I had helped design. I still had copies of the original blueprints. My anger cooled into something sharper: focus. The next morning I drove to the county records office and pulled every document tied to that plan. Sure enough, there it was, my signature on the engineering approval and a maintenance clause naming me as retained consultant until the project's official handoff. A handoff that, thanks to budget cuts, never happened. Technically, I still held oversight privileges. And by law, if misuse or environmental violation occurred, I could request an inspection freeze. I spent the next 2 days assembling a report, photos of the destruction, copies of HOA letters threatening fines, groundwater contamination risks from dumped concrete. Then I called an old colleague, Dana Miles, now a compliance officer for the City Utilities Department. When she heard what happened, she said, if they filled a live well without a permit, that's an environmental offense. Send me everything. By Friday afternoon, a temporary suspension order was issued on the HOA's entire water supply contract pending review. Within 24 hours, neighborhood group chats lit up. Why's the water pressure low? Why are bills frozen? Marjorie tried to calm everyone. Just a technical glitch, she posted. But the truth was spreading faster than the rumors. 2 days later, city inspectors arrived with clipboards and sample kits. Residents peeked through curtains as they tested hydrants and opened access panels. By evening, half the HOA board was standing on my porch. Marjorie crossed her arms. You did this. I kept my voice level. I reported an environmental hazard. The city's doing its job. Do you realize what you've caused? She hissed. About as much trouble as you caused when you poured concrete into drinking water. Her jaw tightened. This isn't over. She was right, it wasn't. Over the next week, the investigation revealed that the HOA had extended water lines without city approval, rerouted drainage through protected wetlands, and falsified maintenance records to cover leaks. The city's penalty: immediate suspension of their private water management contract and a massive fine. To protect residents, the utility would take direct control, meaning Marjorie's HOA lost its most powerful tool: control of the water. The same neighbors who once nodded politely at her started knocking on my door instead, asking what really happened. I showed them the paperwork. Facts, not fury. By the end of the week, most of them weren't angry with me anymore. They were angry with her. A month later, the HOA called a special emergency meeting. Curiosity got the better of me, so I went. The community hall buzzed with tension. Residents filled every chair, reporters stood by the walls. Marjorie took the microphone, pale but defiant. There's been a misunderstanding, she began. The city overstepped, thanks to false information from one individual. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Then the door opened and in walked Dana with a briefcase. Good evening, she said. City Utilities here. We have our findings. She placed the binder on the table, flipped it open, and started reading: unauthorized destruction of private property. Illegal disposal of concrete near groundwater. Misuse of community funds. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Marjorie's voice cracked. You can't prove. Dana pointed at a photo on the projector: HOA work orders signed in Marjorie's handwriting. That was it. The room erupted. When the shouting finally died down, the board voted unanimously to remove her as president effective immediately. Then Dana turned to me. Mr. Collins, given your prior involvement with the city plan, we'd like you to serve as technical advisor during the transition. I nodded. Gladly. Marjorie tried to leave through a side door, but reporters swarmed. One of them asked, Do you regret filling Mr. Collins as well? She didn't answer. The next morning the headline read, HOA president removed after engineer exposes illegal well incident. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just runs clear and cold. Winter came early that year. I spent most mornings on the porch, coffee steaming in my hands, watching mist rise from the lake. The new HOA board, smaller, humbler, visited me before Christmas. They wanted guidance on how to rebuild trust. I told them it starts with transparency. Water, I said, only stays pure when everyone sees what flows through it. They laughed, but they listened. In spring, the city restored full service. Bills dropped, quality improved, and neighbors stopped avoiding one another. As for my well, environmental contractors helped me reopen it legally. The city even reimbursed the repair costs, citing it as educational outreach. The first time the pump hummed again, clear water spilling into the bucket, I felt the house breathe with me. Sometimes justice isn't loud, it's steady, like a stream reclaiming its path. I replaced the old wooden cover with a steel cap engraved with one line: respect what sustains you. Whenever new residents move in, they ask about the story. I tell them it's simple: the HOA tried to bury water and learned you can't bury the truth. Power without respect always runs dry. They filled my well to silence me, but all they did was expose their own cracks. You can threaten, you can manipulate, you can even pour concrete over what you don't understand, but truth has pressure, and it finds a way through. In the end, they lost control of the very thing they tried to own. And me? I just let the law and the water do the talking.